Hello friends, I'm Das Food, and today we are going to get right into the video because I don't want to waste too much of your time, and frankly, we've got a lot to discuss. So, in case you don't know, BHVR recently tweeted out that they will be altering 39 of Dead by Daylight's perks, which is a pretty considerable number. It's going to be 22 survivor perks and 17 killer perks, and a lot of these are very strong meta-defining perks right now. In fact, if I had to list every meta perk that's currently running in the game, I would say the only one they're not planning to address is Unbreakable, which is pretty substantial. So obviously the game that we know today is going to look very different in the near future, and that's exciting and terrifying in equal measure. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to throw the 39 perks up on screen, and I wanted to go through and say what I think is going to be changed about each one, and then this will be fun because we can come back and check it off later once we know a little more and say, where was he right, where was he wrong? But again, it's 39 perks, so even if I spend a minute on each perk, we're going to be here for almost an hour. So I'm going to get right into it, and we're just going to go in the order of the graphic that they gave us, which begins with Tinkerers, which is a hillbilly perk, and ends with We're Gonna Live Forever, which is a David King perk. Now, they seem like they almost went in alphabetical order, but there are a couple of inconsistencies with that along the way. And obviously, it starts with Tinkerers, which is just extremely odd. But anyway, that's the order we're going to go with. So if you don't like the order, I do apologize, but it's the order the BHVR thought was best. So let's do that. In evaluating each perk and what I think is going to happen, I'm going to say if I think it is going to get a nerf that will make it worse, a buff that'll make it better, or something in between. That's really the only criteria for this. We're not going to sort them into categories beyond that. So again, all of that, those billion things out of the way, let's get into it. Starting off with Tinkerers, I think this one is going to be a case of a slight nerf. This one is one where I expect there to be some kind of range requirement. Maybe greater gen progress is required, so it's harder to just stay on top of gens that have good progress on them and, slow the game down. Or maybe even less undetectable time, though I don't think that's what they're going to do. Whatever they do, I don't expect anything major here. I just think that the current goal that we're going to notice as we go through is that BHVR really seems like they don't want as much of a slowdown meta anymore from the killer side of things. So I would expect that to factor into Tinkerers, at least to some extent. Next, we have one that is kind of painful, and that is Barbecue and Chili. I expect a slight nerf here. I think the perk is fine as is, so I don't really know what they're looking to change, but expect BHVR to reduce the blood point bonus, if anything. Well, I say if anything, they'll do something, and I think that with the upcoming Prestige rework, they're likely going to be touching the blood point bonus, because with it being less of a grind, there's going to be less reason to reward Barbecue and Chili to the degree that's rewarded now. I would think maybe as much as as 50% instead of 100% bonus blood points, but that's just speculation. This is all speculation. They may also add a cooldown for Barbecue's aura reading abilities, but I feel like that would be overkill, so I really hope they don't do that. Next, the one that definitely strikes fear into the heart of Survivor mains everywhere, Borrowed Time. And it's hard to say for this one because I could actually see it going either way, because they have talked about a buff of just making it base kit, but I'm leaning towards a trade-off of some kind. I think we'll see a situation where the unhooked survivor gets greater protection, while the rescuer is made more vulnerable, possibly through something like the exhausted status effect or something like that. This would seem like a bit of a nerf overall, but it would make the perk function more as intended and probably be generally healthier. It would deter face camping, or not face camping, it would deter tunneling a little more, but also make it to where the person who goes for the save is actually having to risk it for the biscuit there. Next, we have Botany Knowledge, which is a Claudette Morel perk that I really enjoy bringing, and I'm worried this one will be a nerf too. While they may just adjust the numbers a bit, I worry they'll do something kind of silly here, like making Botany only apply when using medkits, but I certainly hope it's just a minor nerf to the numbers and that it's largely left untouched. Just small changes, because I think it's a pretty well-balanced perk as is. Maybe they're just trying to crack down a little bit on the healing meta. At number 5, we have Calm Spirit, and this one almost has to be a buff or a straight-up rework, because while I know this may sound absolutely crazy, I wouldn't be shocked if this one's buffed to counter Killer Instinct some kind of way. So, sometimes you get that where you see the red on the screen and it says, Survivor's right there. It seems like it wouldn't be entirely out of the question for this perk to counter that in some kind of way, because I don't think that would be too strong, but I know some people might, so I'd be interested to hear in the comments below. Are you interested in a perk that counters Killer Instinct? Is that too much? Because I kind of think that might be where they go with this one, but expect a buff regardless. Next we have Corrupt Intervention, which is of course a plague perk, and it's a perk that has only seemingly gotten stronger over time, and now you see it far more often than not, and it is a real slowdown perk, so I expect a definite nerf here. Buffing this perk might literally kill the game, so that's not an option. I expect them to rework this one to make it more active in some kind of way, though I'll admit that one kind of worries me too, because, you know, if you can choose to just like block off X amount of gens, that's going to be crazy strong, and I hope that's not what they go with here. The best case scenario is Corrupt sees a slight nerf to its duration and is left largely the same. I also think it would be nice if maybe one fewer generator were blocked, but, you know, I don't want to make it useless. I just think right now, the way that Corrupt works is pretty painful for survivors. Up next, we have one of the Clown's perks, that is Colorophobia, and given how little this perk is used, I'm expecting somewhat of a buff. Ideally, this perk would increase the terror radius of a killer, but since that perk already exists in the form of Distressing, I'm not really sure what they're going to do. This will almost definitely get buffed, but I do want to warn that behavior needs to be careful here, because a meta where Colorophobia is brought often would not be a fun place to be. Next up, we have Dark Devotion, and this better be a buff, so help me. In actuality, I expect a slight nerf though, where hitting a survivor with a basic attack removes the killer's undetectable status. If they buff it, maybe the perk activates when hitting any survivor, but I feel like that would be kind of strong. But if they do that, maybe just you add that benefit, but then give it a longer cooldown. But overall, I expect a slight nerf, but I don't think that it's going to be made a much worse perk, because it's already kind of niche but fun, and I think that's a good area for it to stay in, so I hope it stays largely the same. Going back to the survivor side of things for a little bit, we go to Dark Sense. This is going to be a slight buff. It's already a decent perk, but it would be used more often if the numbers were improved even just a little bit. So what I see for this one is I would suggest as much as doubling the time that you're able to see a killer after the popping of a gen. So take it from 5 seconds to like 6, 7, 8, even 10 seconds would be, I think, pretty fair. It's stronger for sure, but I don't think it'd be OP. And I think that you'd see this perk get brought a lot more. One thing I wouldn't change is how long you get to see the killer in the end game, but I mean, that's just me. Okay, up next we have Dead Hard. This is the one that everybody's waiting for, and for me, if this is not a nerf, I quit. I'm not joking. If they buff Dead Hard, what is the point? Dead Hard, look, I've already said my piece on Dead Hard. It rewards poor play. It makes bad players feel like they're a lot better at the game than they are, and it makes cocky players a lot harder to deal with. So this one, out of all the Survivor perks, is the most slam dunk. It's going to be a nerf, maybe a full-on rework in some way, but if it's not a full-on rework, I just expect a nerf where either the distance boost or the invincibility frames are on their way out the door. For my taste, losing literal invincibility seems like a no-brainer. I mean, if you were supposed to be the hunted instead of the hunter, how in the hell how are you justifying invincibility? But we'll see. This one needs to be nerfed to the ground, but hopefully, I say nerf to the ground, but that might be a poor way of phrasing it, because I hope that it maintains some level of usability, but definitely not what it has right now, where you see it on 3 or 4 survivors in every game. Another perk that is a bane to the existence of killers everywhere is Decisive Strike, and thankfully it's getting reworked too, and I see another nerf coming. This one just needs to last for less time. Instead of remaining active for a full minute, make it 40 seconds, because this one, that would have numerous benefits. So firstly, it benefits the team in that it makes DS users better teammates, because as it is, if somebody has Decisive Strike and they touch a gen, they touch a totem, they go for any kind of healing action. Basically, if they do anything, they lose that ability, which means you will have teammates sometimes who spend that full minute trying to get the killer to grab them out of a locker or down them and pick them up just so they can get Decisive Strike value. And honestly, it's just not good. That's not good for anybody involved. And for me, I think the ideal is you just cut some of the time off of it so that if you are well and truly getting tunneled, you're still going to be able to use it. But if you're not getting tunneled, you don't have a minute of, neener, can't touch me. Again, invincibility just makes no sense in this game. Next we have Deja Vu, and I foresee a pretty decent buff here. I think that instead of showing 3 generators at the start of the match, I expect a buff to let Deja Vu users see all gens at the beginning of a match so that they can plan accordingly. So they can look and, because that's valuable on somewhere like RPD or some of these larger maps. It would actually be not really valuable, not valuable in the same way like Dead Hard and Decisive Strike that we just talked about currently are, but valuable in the sense of, okay, I can draw out my plan for which gens I'm going to go for. And I think that's pretty good, especially for newer players of the game. So I would expect a pretty decent buff there that makes Deja Vu a little less terrible. At number 13, we have Distortion, which is a Jeff Johansson perk. And this one is a tough call, but I think it has to be buffed in some kind of way. So maybe they adjust Distortion to be more effective against wall hacks from Myers Blight and others. The wall hacks that, come off of add-ons. Other than that, maybe they even just add like 1 more token or something. I mean, not all of these have to be major reworks. And I think this is a good example of one where whatever they do, Distortion's, it's largely operating as intended. So I don't think there's some massive reason to foresee some huge change there. The only way I could see it getting nerfed would be if the nerf to Barbecue and Chili does in fact affect aura readings, and then maybe Distortion has less reason to have so many tokens. But even then, it's a perk that nobody ever brings, so nerfing it would be pointless. I think we'll see a buff here. Back to the killer side of things, we have one of the Nemesis's perks. Wow, that's a hard word to say. And that perk is Eruption. This one is almost definitely going to be a nerf to the incapacitated status effect, wherein survivors can't work on generators for 16 seconds after eruption is triggered, because honestly that just feels terrible. It's no fun from the survivor point of view, and again, if the whole point that behavior is going for is trying to stop the slowdown meta, I don't see a world where they touch eruption but they don't touch the incapacitated status. I don't think it'll be entirely removed, I just think it'll be nerfed. I was kind of surprised to see this next one, which is Scourge Hook Gift of Pain, but I guess it holds up because slowdown builds seem to be directly at behavior's crosshairs, so I expect a minor nerf here. Obviously, this perk is not just amazingly strong right now, so I don't expect anything too big, but I expect to see this perk go from mid to slightly lower mid. It's not great right now, but it's also not terrible, and I think that's about where it'll stay. I just expect a minor nerf here. At 16, we have Hope, and okay, this is a buff for sure. I expect some kind of improvement where the perk lasts longer. My guess would be it would be some kind of permanent 7% movement speed buff after the last gen is completed. But maybe that's too strong. I don't think so. I don't think that's too strong. It's possible it'll be a permanent buff after the exit gate itself is opened or something like that. I'm not really sure. I just think this one's going to be some kind of buff where you get more in-game usage out of it. Even though you're already, you get 2 minutes of Hope right now. I just think it'll be something where they buff it a little bit and call it a day. Because again, guys, I'm not trying to be anticlimactic with this, but I don't think all of these are going to be some, massive thing where it goes from being garbage to meta or meta to garbage. I think a lot of these are going to be kind of minor, with the exception of the very top ones and the very bottom ones. Speaking of very top ones, we have Iron Will, which is a hugely popular survivor perk, and I think this one, I'm pretty confident in what I see happening here. I expect a very slight nerf where instead of being 100% silent with your grunts of pain, it's something like 90%, which is still extremely good, but it's counterable. It's something where you can't hide in a locker and be completely silent and completely unable to be seen. I think that's what we're looking at here. Just something to where you're not completely, entirely 100% silent, but I don't think that's going to knock Iron Will out of the meta. I think it'll still be a very popular perk. Next, we have one of my personal favorite killer perks, which is Jolt, originally Surge, and it is a Demogorgon perk that was later made public. And, I mean, as I said, I like where Jolt is right now, so I'm not really sure what they're dissatisfied with. But again, it's a gen regression perk, and that seems like that is what they're really honing in on, so whatever they do to Jolt, I expect it to be fairly minor. Look for a small nerf or buff to the regression penalty, probably a slight nerf. Again, they're targeting gen regression perks largely when it comes to what the killers are probably losing here, what's going to be nerfed for the killer side. And You know, I think that's a good way to sum it up. Is it's second chance perks for survivors seem like they're going to be punished, while gen regression and time wasting perks for killers seem like they're going to be punished. So I expect a minor nerf here for Jolt, even though Jolt is far from overpowered right now. So I really don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Next, we have one of the more surprising perks that was on here, that being Knockout, and I'm hoping for a very minor buff here. All I really need to see here is just make it so that the benefits of Knockout aren't based on proximity, and I think all will be well there. Just make it so that you get that time where you down somebody, and nobody that doesn't have a physical line of sight is able to know exactly where they are. I think that would be perfectly fine. It doesn't make it overpowered because it's such a short time limit anyway, but you get a little more use out of it. And if they do that, I think everybody would be largely happy with that. But, you know, again, let me know. Do you hate Knockout? Do you think, oh no, I'm just missing something? You know, always let me know. Our first entry from the 20s, we now have Lethal Pursuer, which is another Nemesis perk. So they're really going after our Resident Evil boy here. And I'm looking at a probably a small nerf here, because even if they cut the wall hacks time from 9 seconds to something like, say, 6, the benefits remain largely the same. You get to know where the survivors spawn, and you get to go to them pretty quickly. So I think it's going to be a minor nerf there. I could also see a world where they buff it by, like, you know, 2 or 3 seconds, but I think it'll be a small nerf, but I think that the perk will largely be about as good as it's ever been. At 21, we have Lightweight, and if you are expecting a nerf here, I genuinely and truly want a hit of whatever it is you're smoking, because that stuff must be strong. Lightweight is terrible as is and can only be improved. My initial thought is that it will become something that is like an opposite of Predator, the perk, not the character. And what Predator does is it makes a killer's job easier in tracking by making the scratch marks appear more closely alongside one another. So you're not going to have them going, you know, ever splintering off in the hallways where the survivor isn't, or going up on the walls or anything like that. And I think this is going to do the opposite. I think they're going to keep the current benefits of Lightweight, but also spread out your scratch marks so you can potentially throw off, I guess, killers who struggle with tracking a little more. And that's not going to make it a meta perk, that's not going to make it a very good perk, but it's a nice little bonus. Next up, we have Yui Kimura's Lucky Break. And people are going to be mad no matter what they do on this one, because some people think that Lucky Break is effective but highly situational, while others think along more extreme lines, that it's overpowered as hell or completely useless. And I think this looks like a case where behavior will try to make the perk less powerful but more consistent, which I'm not a fan of that, but that's what I expect to see. So instead of just getting to activate it for one really useful time, I think you might be able to activate it 2 or 3 times, but get a little less use out of it. But, you know, I don't know. That still might be a buff. I'm not really sure what they do here, but I expect this to be one of the more controversial ones. At 23, we have Monstrous Shrine. You hear me, I laugh. I mean, this is one we've been asking for a buff for the longest time, so I would expect a full-on buff, if not a mega rework of the perk. Right now, there's really nothing they could do to make this perk much worse. It has been garbage from day one, and it could use a buff in the strongest way. So I'm glad that they are doing that. What is it going to be? I'm not entirely sure. I would not be shocked if they make it some kind of Scourge hook, actually, and that becomes the Monstrous Shrine, where all of a sudden you have hooks throughout the environment that are really, really strong. But we'll see about this one. It's going to be a buff. Nobody's denying that. Nobody's doubting that. Obviously, debatably the worst perk in the game. How could you nerf it? I mean, sincerely, what could you do to make this a worse perk? It will in some way be strengthened, but they need to be careful, because if they basically keep it as it is, but give it some kind of crazy buff, what's going to happen is you're going to encourage more basement bubbas. And, you know, while I think it's funny, I know a lot of people hate that, so you probably don't want to encourage that. And now going from the most memed on to the most hated killer perk, we have Hex, No One Escapes Death, more commonly known as NOED. And look, an uber nerf for NOED is on its way, because whatever reservoir of tears survivors are going to build up from losing the strength of Decisive Strike and Dead Hard and Iron Will, it is going to be expected to be matched by the nerfs to NOED and Pain Resonance. And I think that NOED is going to be hit considerably harder, just my personal opinion. So this one is a definite mega nerf. And look, I'm excited to see what it is, because for me, even when I was a killer main, I always felt like NOED was just so frustrating, because much like Dead Hard, it rewards poor play, and I just hate to see that. So I'm very excited for this nerf, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. Next up, we have No One Left Behind, and well, I'll speak like a caveman here and say very bad perk, need very big buff. It is awful. Awful, awful perk, needs everything to be buffed on it. More than anything, I'd say probably just a full-on rework. This one, whatever they do to it, it's gonna be better. I mean, even if they do something to make it worse, it'll still be better in that, like, okay, well now it's funny that it's so bad, because right now it's just kind of sad. Next, we have Overzealous, which is a Hattie perk. So a perk that has been in the game for 2 weeks at the time of recording is already getting a rework, and that's kind of a yikes. That said, I feel that in spite of my early reservations, this one could kind of use a buff. Nothing major, obviously, but the perk currently offers a benefit that is tough to gain but easy to lose. So I think they should double down on that and make it even more risk-reward. That, or I think more hopefully, just rework it entirely, because you guys know where I stand. I do not like perks that up gen speed, and I think that if they don't do something about gen speed perks, but they do take a lot of the gen regression perks down a peg, you're going to see killers just legitimately quit the game. Like, and I don't use that lightly. I do think you'll see killers just quit the game, full stop. Up next, we have Off the Record. Much like Iron Will, I think this perk will receive a slight nerf in the Grunts of Pain. So instead of being 100% quiet while Off the Record is active, I think you'll be something like 90% quiet. And I think other than that, it's fine where it is. It doesn't really need anything else. Next, we have the Doctor's perk, Overcharge. With nearly every other gen regression perk due for a nerf, Overcharge may very well find itself slightly buffed here. It's pretty bad as it is, so I don't think it's out of the question for this perk to get a minor buff that tries to make it compete a little more with the other gen regression perks. That being said, there is a small, or actually kind of rather large caveat, that this is a bit of a noob stomper of perks. So if they buff it too much, yeah, gosh, I don't know. This one is going to really be hard on new players. So I don't know. I actually think it's, now that I say that, it's almost possible that it's a nerf instead of a buff, which would be just tragic. Next, we have one of the big ones, that is Scourge Hook Pain Resonance, and this one is most certainly a nerf. This one probably needs some sort of cooldown, because it can be really frustrating when, so I was facing a really good nurse recently, and through Pain Resonance, she was able to keep getting quick downs, and she took a gen from about 80% to something like 20% over the course of just a few hooks. And it was just kind of miserable. And you can say, they're just rewarding her good play, which to some extent is true. But if that anecdote shows you anything, it's that this is a really, really strong perk right now. And I think that everybody would be largely happy to see. Look, I don't think many people, reasonable people at least, are asking for this one to be made terrible. I think just a slight reduction to how much people lose from the generator progress, because it's already valuable. If you scream, you lose a little bit of progress, and then the killer knows where you are and knows that that's the gen with the most progress on it. Those are all valuable things, so just a minor nerf here would go a long way. Number 30, Pop Goes the Weasel. Another gen regression perk, another nerf. Pop has been a killer staple for years, and I worry it's about to be hit hard. I certainly hope that the nerf is minor, but I'm genuinely scared that behavior is going to make an example out of this one, so consider this clown main pretty nervous. At 31, we have Pharmacy, which is one of my favorite guilty pleasure perks, so I can only guess that they're buffing this one. Pharmacy is fun, as is, but largely a waste of time, so I don't know, maybe they change it to where users are guaranteed a purple medkit, or maybe they make it so that opening chests is completely quiet instead of just quieter. Outside of these guesses, I'm not sure what they would do, and I'm also not really sure how they could possibly nerf this one. I mean, what are they going to do, like make it to where it doesn't give you the speed boost to opening chests? Like, that's really the one thing that it's really good for. So I expect a buff here. Next, we have Hex Ruin, and here we have a perk that is no stranger to drastic overhauls. Ruin is due for a nerf, it seems, though I don't think it'll be all that bad. My guess is that Ruin loses 25 to 50% from its current power and keeps ticking along as a pretty darn good perk. Next, after that, we have Saboteur, and yeah, I have no idea here. Saboteur is pretty modest as is, so I have no idea what the plan is here. My guess is that this one could surprise people for better or worse, and this seems to be prime. This seems primed to be one of the wonkier reworks, like the ones where we're like, oh no, what is that? What were they thinking? Because if they buff it much more than it already is, it becomes extremely obnoxious. But if they nerf it, it becomes really hard to see a situation where anybody would bring it. So whatever they do with Saboteur, I'm kind of nervous for this one. Circle this one in red and get back to me. Maybe it's an overreaction. Next, we have Self-Care, which is obviously a Claudette perk that has been, I would say, pretty much in and out of the meta throughout its time in the game, but it's one of the game's first perks, so obviously people have had a lot of time to develop feelings on this one. I'm pretty sure this one's a nerf. While Self-Care remains kind of controversial over just how good it is, what I see here is them removing the medkit buff that it gives, and I think that would be enough. I think that way you still have the ability to heal yourself anywhere, anytime at a reduced speed, but you don't also get the benefit from medkits that you usually should have to run botany knowledge to get, which I understand before anyone says it, botany knowledge gives you a stronger benefit, but you get my point. You're still buffing your medkit proficiency, and when you stack that with botany knowledge, it just gets a little silly. Next, we have Laurie Strode's Soul Survivor, and look, perhaps no single perk needs a total rework more than this one. This is a mega yikes. Bet the farm on a massive buff here, because to nerf it would just be cruel to like all three Laurie fans. Or not fans, I should say mains. I think everybody likes Laurie, but I just don't see her that much, so I don't think she gets a ton of mains, but I think everybody likes Laurie. Next, we go from a terrible, horrible, very bad perk in Soul Survivor to an absolute S++ tier perk in Spine Chill. So this one to me seems simple enough. I think all they need to do here is remove the action speed buff and be done with it. Spine Chill would remain a very good, very great perk, but it wouldn't make life harder for killers during two separate stages of the game. Because right now, if you just removed what I talked about, what you'd still know is, okay, the killer's looking at me within 36 meters, and I increase my odds of triggering a skill check. Both of those are very useful. But, see, that is making the killer's life a little harder before the chase. And then you get the buff to vault speed and all that, and that makes their life harder during the chase. So right now I think it's a bit of an unfocused perk that probably offers too much power. So yeah, I think this one's a nerf. Next, we have Tenacity. And it's kind of weird to me that they chose to address Tenacity instead of Unbreakable, but then again, the world is an odd place. Because the much more broken Unbreakable, ironically, isn't on the chopping block, I expect a nerf to Tenacity that will in turn nerf Unbreakable. I think we see a nerf to crawl speeds here, but probably not much more, because again, Tenacity's not that strong. Like, you know, it's a funny perk and it's a fun perk, but it's not that strong of a perk, so I don't expect anything major here. The final killer perk that's getting reworked to some extent is going to be the Nurse's perk, Thanatophobia, and Behavior seems to want a quicker pace of play, so Thanatophobia is almost certainly getting nerfed. Like so many of these perks, I expect a numbers rework and nothing more, which I realize isn't the most exciting thing, but it's what I see happening. Finally, we end it with David King's We're Gonna Live Forever, and much like I think the blood point bonus is going to be reduced for barbecue and chili, I think the same is going to be true for We're Going to Live Forever, which, again, while I'm all for making as many blood points as possible, if they are going to release this update where the grind is greatly cut down on soon, you know what, that's fine. It won't be my favorite thing they've ever done, but it's fine. I hope largely that it isn't too drastic, and that's all that we can get from there, because I don't really know what else you would do to this one. I think that the perk's in a pretty good place right now. Possible reduction to the pickup speed, but I think that's all we would see there, and even then, I think it'd be pretty minor, so it's still going to be a very good perk. But hey, deep breaths, that's going to do it. That is 39 perks, and I only took like 5 hours to get through them all, so I'm very proud of me. But what do you think? Do you disagree about any of these? Because I'm sure you do. Look, if you watched through all this, I'm sure you're like, hey, you know what? I think this one's going to be a nerf, or I think this one's going to be a buff, and you felt the other way. And hey, let's talk about it. Let me hear your thoughts on this. Either way, I am so very excited for what's coming to DBD. It's a nervous excitement because this massive of a change has the potential to make the game a lot better of a place or a lot worse of a place. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. I hope that I get this video out in time that they haven't announced what every perk's going to do, or else I'm going to look like a really silly Willy Billy. But that's gonna do it for me. I hope you have enjoyed. Please do like and subscribe if you did like it, and if you do want to subscribe. And hey, you, remember, I do have a Twitch page. It's awesome, Das_food. We stream 3 times a week. Hey, that's kind of fun. But that's gonna do it for me. That's my spiel. Until next time, I have been Das Food. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my